Welcome to our Gifts of God program, Sunday Talk. So happy to have you with us. It's a beautiful day, as I was saying, here in Washington. We've had a number of days in a row, not a cloud in the sky, and 40-degree weather, which is pretty good. It's walkable weather. And so we're happy in our corner apartment here in Foundry Lofts. I wanted to talk today about this, what we've been discussing in the podcast about extension versus projection. Okay, so extension is something that we get aligned with when we're in touch with our true self, our Holy Spirit self. And it can only give joy, right? So we have to keep it really simple. When we're sharing or giving something that makes us joyful, we increase the joy in ourselves and we increase the joy in others. And that's an extension of the kingdom. And I think today's podcast was about that. I think it might even have the title been Extension of the Kingdom. Now, there's another thing we can do called projection, which is not a real sharing. It's when we're feeling something strongly in our ego mind, in our disconnected mind of fear, guilt, anger, discontent, any number of emotions that are very not positive, kind of put us in a bit of a funk or a downward spiral. And because we're feeling that and not liking it, especially fear, we will tend to find reasons out there to quote unquote project it. So let's just say we're feeling a little bit irritated about life or something, and somebody then is angry in our space. Well, rather than see they're just mirroring a little piece of our own anger, we will project our disapproval or our anger onto them. And so we never really look at the source of the anger being in ourselves. And that's called projection. So, and it usually involves blame. It usually involves making somebody else wrong. It usually involves some kind of a mild or strong attack thought in ourselves. And then we try to justify that. Oh, it's the other person who's making the mistake. We're, lily white and we're good, but someone else is in our space making some big error, and it's our responsibility because we're so good to point that out to them, how far off they are. Well, that's a projection, and that doesn't usually work. In fact, it's not really a sharing at all. It's not really, the Course would say that's not even communication. We have this notion that we can communicate anger, but what anger does is it's actually that which severs communication. So it's not really a communication at all. We think that, oh yeah, well we've got that across, we're justified in our anger, and we've made it known to somebody that we're really upset. And we think that that's a communication. Well, actually, it breaks down the communication. So we have to see that. All right, then, well, how do we deal with, let's just say, something like anger, which is a common projection? How do we deal with that when we're feeling activated, as we say? Sandra and I say, well, I'm feeling activated. Well, how do we deal with that once we're feeling it? Because it's common. Some things can activate us, and they do. And then we have to respond to that or be responsible in that feeling. Good question, don't you think? Well, Sandra gives this method that she actually received from Babaji. How do you handle your anger when you're feeling it? And he said to her, well, you don't stuff it because that hurts you. And you don't project it because that hurts somebody else. So you don't ignore it or stuff it, and you don't act upon it or put it out there, because both are very hurtful. Well, what do you do with it then? Because it's there. He said, you look at the reason, the thought that you have causing the anger in you, and you change the thought. And then in the looking at it, like I'm feeling activated because, and then you always turn the lens of introspection around and look inside. Okay, a thought I have that's causing this anger is, and it's always self-responsibility then. So when you do that, automatically you're not projecting. You've stopped the projection. Because projection is you want to find something out there as the cause of your anger. And then you're feeling the anger within, but you're looking outside for the source when the source isn't outside, it's inside. It's a thought in your mind that's an ego thought that's activating you, and it doesn't feel good. And because it doesn't feel good, you want to get rid of it. And the first thing you do is find something out there to project it onto, thinking you got rid of it, but you didn't. You just strengthened it. Not only do you still have that thought in you that caused the anger, but now you've projected it onto somebody else. And now they're kind of in that not feeling good space. So this is a common thing. We all do it. And how do we correct it? Well, Babaji said, you look at the thought within yourself causing the anger. I'm feeling activated, and the thought causing my activation is, I feel abandoned. I feel discounted. I feel disrespected. Well, what are those thoughts? Those are ego thoughts. Those are ego thoughts that we have to correct. I feel abandoned. Well, it's impossible to be abandoned by the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's always there. Babaji's always there. The Dream Team's always there. The Divine Mother's always there. And even the people you love that you hold in your mind, they're always there, even if they've deceased, So you can't be abandoned. Well, then, okay, I feel disrespected. Well, all right. Well, what's that about? I mean, disrespected for what? So this is the way you have to do these self-inquiries when you're feeling activated. And I think as you do those examinations, the things that you felt activated get dissolved. And that's the purpose of the Holy Spirit, is to dissolve those thoughts in your ego mind that you think are real, so that when you see that they're not real, or what we said like yesterday in the podcast, they're unbelievable even if you believe them. That was the theme yesterday of the podcast, the unbelievable belief. And then it was saying generally that the ego itself is unbelievable, but we continue to believe in it. So when we remove our belief in those thoughts that make the ego up, I'm abandoned, I'm discounted, I'm disregarded. When we undo those thoughts, there's nothing more to believe in. So we don't have the upset. It like dissolves the upset. You're never upset for the reason you think. Usually you think it's something out there that's upsetting you, but in fact, it's your thoughts upsetting you. I can be hurt by nothing but my thoughts. That's lesson 281. I am affected only by my thoughts. That's like lesson 330, I don't know, 6 or something. 337. I'm affected only by my thoughts. Well, then the source of any upset would have to be a thought in your mind. And it would be an ego thought. Because if it's a Holy Spirit thought, it's only going to be joy, right? So if it's not joy, then you got to like take responsibility of, that's one of my ego thoughts. And I'm responsible for that. And I'm responsible for undoing that. So, all right. So that's the background I wanted to start with. That we can only be upset by thoughts, and that we can only project, which would be of the ego, or we can extend, which would be of the Holy Spirit. And we want to get into extension and clean up any habits of projection in ourselves. And life is going to give us those tests. So I had a test this week. We had a former student who we'd done a lot of work with. And even this former student had come with us on India Quest and had done some of our work, quite a lot of our work online sessions, showed up occasionally for, mantra breathes. And I think she might have been on the Gifts of God last year, receiving the podcasts. Well, I sent out this email because I thought, well, maybe I need to keep putting out the Gifts of God and other people could come on. It doesn't really matter what time of year people come on. They can come on and be there for a whole year. So I put this email out, and then I got this response from a student. And she was saying, well, basically, she was too busy, and she was listing all these things she was doing with the course and all of her activities and the facts that she had studied the course for many years, 9 years, I think. But she was just too busy to be in the Gifts of God. Well, I felt that it was a pulling away, and it was an isolation from the work we're doing. So I wrote back and I said, well, I feel it's a pulling away, and I feel like that you're in pulling away, isolating yourself from our work. Well, maybe that was the wrong thing to say, because I got quite a reaction back, right? I got quite a reaction. Her defending herself that she's not isolated, she's got all this going on, and all these friends on the weekend that she sees, and that how dare I use this word isolation. So, okay, the thing got from like a little bit stuck to a lot stuck to almost impossible to unravel, right? So finally, as I usually do when I get in those situations where it seems like there's no exit, I just take responsibility, and I sent her a note saying, I apologize, I used that word isolation. And apparently we both have lessons to learn. And I just wish you a lot of blessings in extending whatever the work is you're doing to those people in your life, and extending, what is it you're extending? Well, pure joy. So I think I got it cleaned up in the end, but it was a big lesson for me, because sometimes as teachers or as people who are in this work where people come to us and they actually want us to see, they want us to kind of look at their thoughts they lay on the table, right? And a lot of them are our ego thoughts, and then help them process that and get out of that. I just get in this kind of habit of looking for, well, where's the negative thought in this communication that needs to be looked at and dissolved. So for me, it was this word isolation. And because that's what I felt from her, that she was basically saying, I don't have time for your work anymore. Well, okay. All that you received from it didn't give you enough value, you'd want to stick with it. And it felt like an isolation. So that was kind of the nature of my communication. And then it went nowhere. So what's the lesson in this for me? All right. So I think I've expressed to you before that it's not about numbers, but at the same time, when we put energy into something in our work, Sandra and me, or Sandra and I, we like it to go out and reach as many people as possible. And so it's also our responsibility to put it out enough that we're reaching a little broader group of people, right? So when I put the Gifts of God out, and we had 40 people last year, and then all we have is 5 this year, or 6, I got to thinking, well, what am I doing? What am I doing that's not drawing the people in, or not filling the space? And is there anything I can do to put this out more, share it more, extend my joy? I think you realize that we do have a lot of joy doing this. I feel great doing these talks. I feel great doing the podcast, Sandra too. Even if we're going through something, it's kind of how we process ourselves. We process it by sharing and by looking at the lessons ourselves and getting the lessons in our own life, right? As teachers, it's our job to be the best student. And so that's kind of what we're doing in this work, is that we're trying to really be with it and be the best student and get the lesson and give it the attention and then share that process with you. And we hope that that is making a difference. Now, I should not feel isolated. But that's, I think, what this lesson for me was. When you see something in another, it may be there. There could be this isolation that we have this tendency to go into. When we're not extending, we're isolating ourselves. Well, I felt no extension coming back from this student, but the isolation was something in me I had to look at. And when I started to look at that, all my feelings about, there were 40 people and now there's 6 and I was starting to see that, I had the same sense of back or sense of isolation in myself. And that's really more what I was seeing in this email from this student than her situation. So when I started taking responsibility for that, it was a really great lesson for me. And also a lesson in how is it that we point something out to someone when we feel it or we see it, and without being a projection, but being a correction for both, And this is really tricky. It's tricky. Because we don't want to be buying into someone else's misperceptions, but we also want to be seeing the misperception from the standpoint that our first responsibility is to correct it in ourselves, right? So if I was seeing isolation in a student pulling away, I should be asking, well, what am I doing that I'm pulling away and isolating myself from others? That should have been my first question to myself. in my response to this email. And I think had I done that first, it would have been not upsetting to her or to me. It would have just been a clarity. It could have been looked at it, as Tara Singh often said, in an impersonal way. He would often use that word. We have to look at things dispassionately and impersonally. We have to even look at the ego impersonally. What did he mean by that when he said impersonal? He meant that it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about this one issue. Are we in the ego's thought system, or are we in the Holy Spirit's thought system? Are we projecting or are we extending? All right? And when we see it in that very impersonal way, and we keep it in that impersonal observation, we don't project onto somebody else. We don't blame onto somebody else. We're just looking at the issue in general that we're all stuck in. Now, this word isolation, I think we've all felt that in our life, right? We've all felt at some point in our life isolated. We've all felt at some point in our life others have pulled away from us, and it makes us a bit sad. And then we feel that isolation. So I think looking at it like this in an impersonal way, it's like we're undoing it in ourselves, but we're also undoing it for other people too, because then they can look at the issue without defense. Because the way I presented it in the response to her email, I'm sure from her perspective, she felt it was a judgment or a blame or an attack. That's how she perceived it. It's not how I meant it. I meant it in an impersonal way, but that wasn't how I communicated it. And had I looked first in myself at what is it that I feel, what is it I'm feeling isolated about? What is it that I'm feeling like when somebody pulls away from our work? What is it that I'm feeling? Am I feeling joy? Am I feeling sadness? Am I feeling like, oh, I failed? Am I feeling, all those things? If I would have looked first at that and taken the responsibility, the undoing would have started in me first. And then whatever I communicated wouldn't have had that energy of blame, of cornering someone, and it might have been different. So as it was, the way I put it out, it took me a couple of days to kind of undo all that was projected, right? So the subject of this talk is, are we projecting or are we extending? And I want to stick with that. Well, I saw after a few emails back and forth that it was my projection, and I needed to correct that, and I needed to apologize for that, which I did. But it was a lesson. And then we finally ended on this statement, well, there was a lesson for both of us in these exchanges, and I'm very grateful for the lessons and, Godspeed. And I think everything was put in the right order. But I just wanted to share that, as I'm sure we all go through those things, where there's something that happens, and then it could be something someone else is communicating, and they're the ones like that. It looks like the error is going on, but it's also our error. I had this teacher in Ho'oponopono. This is this Hawaiian forgiveness process, and her name was KR. We just called her KR. I think her full name was Kamaili Rafaelovich, so we just called her KR for short. And she was really excellent. And I would often do personal sessions with her. And I remember one time, because the master teacher of that was this kahuna, Hawaiian kahuna, Morna Simeona, and she was the one that brought the Ho'oponopono out to the Western world, to the world at large, so people could practice this, and they didn't have to be Hawaiian, and it didn't have to be in a kahuna setting. You could just do it in yourself, and it was a beautiful thing she put out. Well, anyhow, when she passed, there were a couple of other people, KR and this other gentleman, Ihaleakala, who taught, and they were my teachers. So I remember KR saying, Morna said to us, when you're doing the Ho'oponopono, don't go beyond your nose or your toes. That was her statement. Don't go beyond your nose or your toes. Well, what she meant by that was, if you're ever seeing something off, or something, a problem, or something quite not the way you want it to go, right? And we all see those things, right? Well, don't look beyond your nose and your toes means you ask yourself, what is inside of me that is projecting that? All right. So the responsibility is always in yourself. And whatever's going on out there is also going on in here. And that's just a mirror of what's going on in here. So when you do the cleaning, as they call it, they would call the forgiveness process the cleaning, right? Because you're cleaning up your inner self, you're cleaning up your mind, which is very consistent with the Course in Miracles. It talks about the mind, the content of the mind, what is in the mind, and we have this part called the ego that's not our real mind, but we think it is, and it's always projecting, and it's always upset, and it's always like in conflict, et cetera, et cetera. Well, so our job is to undo that part of our mind, to not believe in the unbelievable, which we continue to believe in, right? So Morna was saying the same thing. Don't look beyond your nose or your toes, which means whatever is going on you don't like out there, first is going on in you, and the correction of that has to happen inside of you. So you can correct everything without even talking to the people that are part of the quote unquote problem, right? If you do the cleaning or the forgiving, then, and that starts in you, it's all going to just get cleaned up automatically. You don't have to worry about the external if you're cleaning those things inside yourself. So for me, it was a great week to look at my feelings about, isolation, students that are our students and then not our students, and they could be with us for years, and then all of a sudden, like as if overnight, they're not with us. And I have to be okay with that. And in fact, I have to send blessings, not feelings of disappointment or isolation or, discontent, whatever. I have to see it as a blessing. I have to see it like, well, I went 4 years to college and then I never went back to that institution anymore. So maybe I just did my 4 years and I was done. Just like people may be with us for 2 or 3 years or 4 years, and then they're done and they graduate and they move on and they have different lessons to learn and they have different teachers to listen to and they have different people to interact with. So I think it was a good week, and I saw my projections and I worked on myself, I corrected them, and I got to a much more beautiful space within myself. So I think in the future, when I encounter people who had worked with us and then now they're moving away from us, that I can send a blessing and not feel hurt or disappointed or any of that other stuff, you know. Because when you feel those things, the ego loves to feel that hurt. And then the ego loves to project and try to correct somebody else out there, right? And it never works that way. Not if you're really trying to clean it up and you're really trying to forgive and come to this stillness of the peace of God within. You know, if you're really trying to get to that inner peace and you're really trying to have that experience of the peace of God, not just a mental thought, but a really in the core of your bones knowing, right? You cannot project. And every correction that you make has to be not beyond your nose or your toes. And if you just apply that and you say, whoop, stop, not beyond my nose or my toes, what's in me that's making up this scenario, then you're not going to project. And you'll be cleansing and you'll be healing and you'll be letting go of the ego. You'll be not believing in the unbelievable. And anything like that's not pure joy is, according to the Course, unbelievable because it comes from your ego mind. Conflict, strife, anger, fear, guilt, all those are coming from the ego, and that is not who you are. That's not your real mind. In fact, the Course calls it an illusion, a projection. It's not even there, like a movie. You turn off the projector and the thing disappears. Well, where was it? If it's not there now on the screen of your life, where was it? Well, the Holy Spirit would say it wasn't even there. It was only there because you projected it. And when you turn off the projector, it's not there. So it's unreal. It's an illusion. It's unbelievable. To have a real, conviction, which would be what belief is, real belief, a conviction. Esther Hicks says a belief is just a thought you keep thinking. Well, are you going to keep thinking with the ego's thought system, or are you going to keep thinking with the thoughts of God? You could just as easily keep thinking a thought of God and be in pure joy, right? You could just as easily think that. Your mind, you rule your mind and you alone rule your mind. And what are the thoughts you're putting in there? And if you're thinking with the thoughts of God, it's only going to produce joy. It's guaranteed. So if you're not feeling the joy, you can pretty much bet somewhere inside your nose and your toes, you're thinking some attack thought, some feeling of guilt that you want to project and get rid of. Well, so this was a week where I was really looking at that, how swift we project and how self-righteous we can be in our projections. Oh, well, I'm correct. A mistake in somebody else that's really off. Well, what's the thing Jesus said in the Bible? It's a very good line where he said, don't look for the little twig in your neighbor's eye when you have this big mote in your own eye. Stop trying to remove the little twigs in somebody else's process when you've got this huge blind spot in yourself. So, well, I thank this student who put me in a process, and it was good. I got a lot out of it. And see, when we look at it in a quote unquote impersonal way, and we take responsibility, it can be a huge lesson. every little encounter. There are no chance encounters. So every interaction, even if it's going a way you don't want it to go, is got some great lessons in there for you to undo something. And if you stay with it and you disengage from the battlefield and you don't blame and you don't feed the thing, I could have easily fed the thing and then shot off another email saying, well, yeah, this just proves that you're isolated. Well, no, I didn't. I said, okay, isolation. I need to look at that in myself. Why do I feel isolated? And then as soon as I did that, the whole thing started to just, this house of cards of of this conflict just sort of just kind of fell down. And yeah. Sandra and I have been having some very deep discussions about happiness, because this is what we're presenting a couple weeks from now, happiness and longevity. We've been dedicating the mantra breathes to that. And by the way, if you don't already know, usually the talks in the mantra breathe go up on Sandra's YouTube channel, so you can re-listen to them even if you're not there at the mantra breathe. I think this one we did yesterday was on longevity, and the one I did last week, I think on happiness, is up on, I have a YouTube channel as well, so you can listen there. Yeah, so we've been talking about happiness that is not affected by the external. And also that healing, which I think we're all interested in, especially as we get older and we start kind of accumulating little aches and pains in the body. Healing is not diminished or deterred by a symptom. Now, what do I mean by that? And this is probably going to be part of this happiness and longevity. When we're experiencing a symptom, it's a message, right? It's like telling you, oh, something's off, wake up, look within. What are you thinking that's not the right thinking? Wrong-mindedness, the Course would call it, or a defense. It says sickness is a defense against the truth. So we do have to look within, and we do have to look at the thoughts producing that, whatever that is, in our bodies. The body is just a printout. It's just a tool to communicate and look at ourselves. So when we look at that, and we have quite a number of means to do that, we have a number of books that, one we call the Big Book. It was written by a very brilliant psychologist, where he looked at almost every physical ailment, disease we could possibly have. And then he also went into what are some of the thought factors, family patterns that would contribute to that particular disease. So usually when we got a symptom in our body, we process it and we look at those things. We get out the Big Book. Oh, what's he say about that? Louise Hay also wrote a book, very famous book, You Can Heal Your Life, where she's giving you the metaphysical causes of physical symptoms, right? All right, so we all do that work. Then we breathe, do a couple mantra breathings, but we may still have the symptom. Now, there's a place that we're going to look at in this training where it says, don't use the lingering effects of a symptom to doubt that the healing is taking place. Well, you're getting into realms of faith and trust now that usually science doesn't look at. You're getting into spiritual dimensions. If you have a symptom and you do all the processing that you think you need to do, and you do breathing, and you do all the spiritual cleansing, and you do all the forgiving, and you look within and you see, well, what is it in myself I need to forgive? What is it in others I need to forgive? And you do all that diligently, and you still may have the symptom. Well, are you going to get discouraged? Are you going to lose faith? Are you going to say, oh, spiritual healing doesn't work? And all my processes are for naught. And, why am I doing all this inner work if it's still not shifting? That's the temptation. We may be tempted to say, well, because the symptom is still there, the healing didn't take place or the healing didn't happen. And it says, Jesus even says, that's the ego's temptation to say that. And be careful that you use lingering symptoms in the body to deny that healing is happening. So be careful with that. It's like a temptation. And I think we've all been in that place where we have something in our life that's not going the way we like, could be in our bodies, and we apply all the spiritual tools that we have to it. And then that, whatever that is, still is lingering a bit. Now, maybe it's not lingering with the intensity that it was before, but it's still there. Well, I don't know. We're not to the point where we could just wave our hand over a physical symptom like Jesus did with the lame and the blind and the whatever, and instantly that symptom is gone. May take us a little more time. May take us more lessons to learn. Yeah, and I think one of the disciples was lame. I forget which one it was. And he went to Jesus once and he said, well, I'm seeing you heal all these people instantly. And why can't you do that for me and my lameness? He's limping along, with a cane or something. And Jesus says, yeah, but you still have lessons to learn from that. And it'll make you a stronger healer yourself, empathetic in relating to people in that pain. And there's still a reason why you have this lameness. And that's something for yourself to undo. And I could, yes, like you say, wave my hand and it'd be gone. And Babaji often said that too to people coming to him. Like, I could heal you instantly, but what would you learn? So if we're learning to be a healer, and that's what we've dedicated our life to, then some of those things going on in ourself are the very lessons we need to learn in order to help others get out of those situations, right? So if we're constantly walking around beating ourselves up because we have certain symptoms in our body, we're lame in some degree, then what good is that going to do? How are we going to use that as an excuse to not extend? So it's a temptation. But it's also a lesson in that we want to be healed healers, right? We want to be healed healers, not unhealed healers. So we're still diligent about it. We're still diligent to process ourselves if there's a lingering symptom. But don't doubt that the healing is taking place. And who knows how long that will take. Like for Jesus, he could have waved his hand and instantly it's gone. But maybe for us, we have lessons to learn over a period of time. And that symptom is helping us learn those lessons. So don't judge it. Oh, well, it's not overnight. Okay. But it's still a healing and it's still taking place. And we're still giving our attention to it. And we're We're extending the love to ourself in not judging the symptom. And therefore, it's being dissolved. It may have taken us 5 lifetimes to make up that symptom. So how can we expect that in 5 minutes it would be gone if there's things that we need to undo and look at that we've been doing for 5 lifetimes? So you see, the weight, we don't know what the karma of that symptom is. And it'll be revealed to us, but we have to be diligent and stay with it. So I think that's one of the things about happiness. Like, if we have things in our life that aren't going the way we want, they're external. And even the body, it's an external tool, you know? It's an external thing from the mind. Are we going to use the external to determine our happiness? Well, what we're discovering, and what it's coming back to me, some of the things that Tara Singh said are having new meaning for me. He kept constantly saying, don't be affected by the external. Well, what he was meaning when he said that was your spiritual joy, your truth, is not affected by the external. So don't use that to fool you. If you're saying, oh, well, I can't be happy because it's a rainy day, or I can't be happy because I don't have as many students in the Gifts of God this year as I did last year. Well, yeah, but the students I have in this year are attentive students that come. You're all here on Sunday for the talk. Well, last year, it was only you who were coming anyway, so where were all those other people anyway, even though they were part of the Gifts of God? So it's good to let go of dead wood, so to speak. All right, anyhow, but don't judge the situation by the external. That's basically the lesson he was saying. And that's also the lesson we're getting about happiness and giving a course on happiness. It's our responsibility to liberate people from using the externals as a condition for their own happiness, because you're never going to find it that way. You know, like in the Declaration of Independence we have here, Jefferson was very smart, and he said, well, we have these inalienable rights to life, liberty, and then he said pursuit of happiness. But that's a little deceptive. Yes, we all have the freedom to pursue our happiness however we want to do that. And that's partly our liberty, our freedom, our God-given right. But there's a deeper teaching in what we're talking about now. Are you pursuing the happiness inside, or are you pursuing it in the external situation? Because if you're looking and pursuing it out there, you may never find that peace of God, that true happiness inside. Because these situations out there will never quite align the way you want them to be and what you're pursuing. So the source of your happiness is inner happiness, inner peace, inner joy. And once you blunder upon that, the external cannot affect it. Hurricane comes, you're just as much joy as you are if it doesn't come, you know? So this is a test, because we are attached to the external situations being a certain way, and we want to keep that order in our life. Nothing wrong with that. We have a very beautiful place here, very orderly, very spacious, and those would be the conditions that we would naturally pick to live in. But that's kind of provided, you know? we're gonna set things up like that no matter where we are. It could be Washington, it could be Nashville, it could be Timbuktu, it could be our hotel room in Qatar. We're always going to set up an environment to create that holy space. So it's still emanating from within. How we set up that external, the source of it is some inner joy within ourselves that would only set it up like that, you see? So it's not the external affecting us, it's us affecting the external. It's that inner joy in us affecting the external. So it's just naturally going to fall into place and we don't have to worry about it. And there's nothing to pursue. The pursuit of happiness is the discovery that happiness is within you. And it's always been there, whether you've been happy or not. It's like Taraji said, peace is always there, but you're absent. It's always in you, but you're absent. You're off somewhere else in some self-projected conflict. And you don't even see the peace that's already in you because you're too preoccupied with past thoughts and attack thoughts and judgments and projections and yada, 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 you know? So, well, I think that's clear in us. We're pretty clear about that. Yeah. I had a good week. I didn't talk anything about it in this talk, but I sent it out to you guys. There was a fantastic show of Rothko's paintings at the National Gallery on paper, smaller works, not these big canvases that he's known for, right? These were like, 30 by 50 inches, small works on paper. It was just delightful. Some colors that I saw in those paintings I never saw in the bigger ones. And I wrote the article on it, and I think I sent it to you guys. But that was my joy this week. I do my little art look, which is also my little art walk, because I walk up to the National Gallery. It takes me 33 minutes. I've timed it a number of times, and I can't do it less. And if I just stay with it, it doesn't take longer. So I do my little art walk, and then I do my art look, and then I write something. And it's such a joy to do that for me. I've had a little bit of a hiatus since we've been on the road, but now I'm kind of back in the flow of that, and it's just so joyful. I'm on cloud 9 on the day I do that. So hope you've got that, and it's worth reading. Yeah, it's about immortality, because Rothko committed suicide at the end, but his works live on and will live on forever. As long as there are museums and people that take care of those things, they'll live on because they're so brilliant. Yeah. So he puts us in the light, and he must be the light in order to paint the light, right? So that's the truth about all of us. Whatever we extend is going to be the light, and the light is in you already, and never doubt that. And nothing can extinguish it. So whatever you extend in joy is going to be your light, and you can do that. So God's will for us is perfect happiness.